Okay, let's take a look at the nature of force. When we talk about forces, a force is a push or pull, and that's basically all it is. It's a push or pull. So if I push an object in this direction, then we can say that I'm exerting a force on it. Or if I wanted to say, I could say if I pull an object, I'm exerting a force on it. Okay? A push or a pull. So again, by definition, force is simply a push or pull. Okay? And the force of an object is going to be measured in the terms of what we call newtons. Okay? The force of an object is measured in what we call newtons, and we represent that with an N. That's the unit of measurement. Okay? So, often there's going to be more than a single force that acts upon an object at any one time. In other words, you're not just going to have one force. You're going to have several forces. You know, if you're pushing a box, then you're pushing it. That's one force. But then the ground has friction, so that's another force, for example. So there's generally going to be more than one force on an object. The combination of all forces is called a net force. So we could look at this like this if we wanted to. We could say, okay, well, if we had a box and it was going to be pushed, what are all the different forces that could act upon it? Well, we could push on the box in this direction, but then we're also going to have a force coming from the ground going up. We would have gravity, right, coming down, and then we would have friction going in this direction. So the total of all these forces that are acting upon it, that's going to be the net force. Right? Again, right here, you have somebody pushing. Up top, you have gravity. This would be the ground, and then friction, pushing back in that way. So that's net force. And that's what we mean by it. By definition, I would say that net force is the combination of all forces acting on an object. And that, by definition, is going to tell me is going to be net force. So we also want to talk about what's called balanced forces, and this is important. Understanding balanced forces and unbalanced forces is a very important concept that you need to make sure that you really understand. When we talk about balanced forces, we're saying that when we have a balanced force, it's when an object does not change the object's motion. Okay, so a balanced force, in other words, we're saying that equal forces acting on an object in opposite direction. So think about like your catapults. When after you've launched your catapult and the arm hits the top of the catapult, then the arm doesn't move anymore. Nothing in the catapult is moving. The arm, the bar, nothing's moving. Those are balanced forces. So when we have a balanced force, again, what we're saying is that the forces are equal in all directions. So it's this and this and here and here would all be equal. We might even say that, so if we had, 5 newtons right here, okay, so let's say that this side was exerting 5 newtons of force in this direction. And then we were exerting 5 newtons of force in this direction. Right here. And then another 5 newtons in this direction. and then another 5 newtons in this direction, we would have balanced forces all the way around. So the object would not be moving. So then by definition, balanced forces are forces that, when acting on an object, they do not change the object's motion. Okay, this by definition would be balanced force. Now the definition of an unbalanced force are forces that result in some change in the object's motion. Okay, they're forces that result in the change of an object's motion. So again, if I had an object and I exerted, say, 5 newtons in this direction, if I exerted 5 newtons in this direction, but then, say, going in this direction, there was only 1 newton, or say 2 newtons, then I would have an unbalanced force. Okay, this would be an unbalanced force. So if that were the case, and I exerted 5 newtons here and 2 newtons here, then the object would actually be moving in this direction. That would be considered an unbalanced force. So it's really important of all this to understand that a force is any push or pull on an object. The net force is the combination of all those forces: friction, gravity, whatever. If you're pushing a box, okay, the force that you're exerting on it. Those are all forces, and the combination of that is the net force. If you have a balanced force, like a box sitting on the ground, then the object is not going to move. There's going to be no change in that object's motion. But if it's unbalanced, if there's more force going in one direction, such as here, the 5 newtons, and it's greater than all the other forces in the opposite direction, then it's going to have motion, or a change in its motion. And that gives some explanations to understand the nature of forces.